let's jump in. I wanted to talk about the topical issue, Rabi, Dewald Brevis. I watched that innings the other day and I was blown away by the skill, the ambition, the mentality. There were so many different layers to that innings that struck me. And then I remember that he's 19. And I wanted to speak about him from a coaching perspective. When you get a kid like this, right? And what qualities separates some 19-year-olds, some guys in their early 20s, I think like a Tristan Stubbs, who are ready to be exposed to the next level versus guys the same age who aren't. What do you look for? What are those qualities that separate those two groups of young players?
I think firstly, they got to have exceptional talent. I mean, when you look at especially young batsmen, I always look at how they strike the ball and the consistency of the ball striking. You just know their sound, the ball of the bat makes it just a completely different sound to anyone else's, right. Which means they're probably striking it in the middle of the bat consistently. Which means there's a natural talent there for batting. I think in Devy's cases, when you get these types of kids, you don't overcoach them. I think a lot of their development is around self-exploration, and you got to be almost skilled enough to sort of ask them the right questions. I know it's cliche, but everybody's talking about ask questions as a coach, but it literally is with kids like that. And you got to ask them challenging questions. If, what were you thinking in this period of the game? What was your mentality? How did you try and play this bowler? And often you'll find the feedback is like an experienced player already. It's just about feeling his way through it. So I think you just got to provide the platform for them. I think in Devy's case, where you're seeing his acceleration in T20 cricket, I mean, I know he's been getting 30s and 20s and everybody's, he only gets 30s and 20s. But the T20 cricket, you just look at the mentality and the way he plays. I mean, I was convinced he was going to get 100 before we started this tournament. I was like, someone's going to get it. Yeah. And I mean, all the time at MI, Mumbai Indians, IPL, you went on an academy tour with him. You played CPL. All the exposure to top level T20 cricket. You can see the difference in his body language and confidence in which he plays. And for sure at MI, they don't try and stifle him. They just try and let him explore and see how good he can become. I mean, this kid's doing things probably AB de Villiers wasn't even doing at a similar age. It's that impressive, the things he's doing. And
I was going to actually ask you about that. Like where does he stand in your experience compared to, iconic players of at a similar age, and it's interesting for me that you mentioned that.
Yeah, for me, there's three players I played against. Certainly, that young players coming through that really they stand out for me. It's AB, of course, Hashim Amla, and Riley Rousseau. Actually, that I was like, these are exceptional talents here. You just knew they were going to make it, like for South Africa. In Devy's cases, we don't know how good he's going to become. You can't predict that because he's better than AB at 19, that he may become an AB de Villiers later down the track. You just don't know. Yeah. Everybody's got a path in life. So, but he's certainly showing the glimpses of potential and the hunger and desire, to become the best in the world. Yeah. And at the franchise, I think like Mumbai, they will do everything in their power to get him to that point. So he's in a very fortunate position to be in the right environments at the moment to help his development.
Right. So I'd imagine that at MI for the Cape Town franchise, he was a priority for you guys. I mean, you got him at a base price, which now looks to be a bargain. But what about his time at Mumbai Indians? Spoke to the leadership at Mumbai Indians Cape Town and wanting to have him involved in this franchise for the upcoming T20 competition.
I think Dewald is definitely a long-term. He's got a definite long-term plan for him. Of course, you've got to be exceptionally talented to get bought when you haven't even played a professional game in your life.
Yeah,
that's on the back of what he's done in the SA Under-19 team. So for them, it's just keeping a player in their stable. A guy like Dewald, he's with them at IPL. He's been in the academy tours to England. It's just normal to try and keep him within their structures and develop him over a period of time, because he's going to be a phenomenal IPL player eventually. And you still add his leg spin in and all these other things. So it's more a long-term journey they want to do with Devi at the moment. So he's in a very fortunate position that they do like young players. They punt young players, and the right franchise, I think, for that.
How do we give him the best chance of success, Rob? I hear what you were saying earlier on. We don't know what he's going to become, but there are some controllables that do exist. So how would we give him the best chance for success?
I think he just needs game time, wherever he's playing. He needs to be exposed to first-class cricket. I mean, he says the right things that he wants to play test match cricket, but, with the young players and the amount of opportunities in the T20 game and the paychecks that are being dished out at the moment, it's difficult to say whether he may be swayed at an early age already to just go that route. So, we'd like to see that at least play a couple of years of first-class cricket.
Yeah.
But I think, when you look at his talent, he's definitely, I believe he's ready. You can throw him into an international T20 team already, and just slowly expose him to at least T20 cricket. And then against the right opposition. You don't want to play him against the wrong opposition. You want to give him sort of games where he has a relative chance of success very early doors, and then you just grow him from that perspective. But I think he just needs game time, and that's all he needs. And from there, he'll just explore, how good he can become. But he needs to play first-class cricket. I think it will add some other dimensions to his game in terms of mindset, character building a little bit. So there will have to be a little bit of that for his development.
So there's a debate that, I wrote in April that I thought the Proteas selectors should be brave and take him to the World Cup, even if he doesn't play in all the games. I thought he'd benefit from being in that environment. And I thought even at that stage, there were enough signs that he was ready for international cricket. Obviously, there's a counter argument to that, and I respect that completely. And I wanted to know where you stood.
I mean, when I saw the kid play, I thought he could definitely be thrown into an international, whether that was a World Cup. It's a little bit more layered being picked for a World Cup. I think in South Africa, we view things very linearly a little bit, where throwing in a kid like that is not really a risk when you can see what he can do. I know that threatens other people's positions around the game, and people would say, he needs to still fight, bide his time and all of that. But AB de Villiers was chucked into international cricket after a couple of first-class games, and look where he ended up, So, there are cases where people just develop quick and just have exceptional talent. Yeah. So I do sit in a camp where he's probably ready to be thrown into the odd series of T20 internationals, and that might happen. There may be a regeneration of the team after this World Cup. Who knows? So I'm not privy to the plan, but I could definitely foresee Brevi playing some sort of international T20 cricket after the World Cup.
Right. So switching focus to the World Cup now. One outstanding feature for me in South Africa's win over India was the temperament that they showed after drinks. And so, they were a little bit behind the game at that stage. And I thought, not only the strategy that they emerged from drinks with, but the execution of that strategy. And that speaks to a degree of temperament that I haven't really seen in South African teams at the World Cup prior. And that was a standout feature for me. And obviously, temperament allows talent to soar. And I wanted to know what your observations were around the Proteas temperament leading up to this point in the tournament.
I think I've seen a lot of it, especially in the England tour in T20 cricket. There were good signs there. I think the makeup of the team just looked solid on paper. The bowling looked sorted. They beat an excellent England team in their backyard. So to me, that already said that, they're moving in the right direction in terms of temperament. I think a lot of these players now have a lot of experience of playing leagues around the world and being in championship winning teams, and being exposed to other international cricketers that are maybe world champions and actually So spending time in the dressing room, all of a sudden you're performing maybe a little bit better than someone that's a world champion. I mean, that does help your confidence and temperament. I mean, David Miller now, he's won the IPL basically on the back of his bat a little bit too.
Yeah.
He's one of the big players there in that team.
Yeah.
He travels, plays around the world.
Him and Hardik had that partnership in the final to win it. Yeah.
Absolutely. So David was always this type of player. It's just you're seeing, his skill levels against spin bowling improve, his temperament and his confidence. Maybe it's a leadership role that David, needed to be given maybe at the earlier stage, and we could have seen this a little bit earlier, but he's an incredibly hard worker. And just in general, all the players, man. I mean, Aiden Markram's playing in the IPL. Riley Rousseau's been part of championship-winning PSL team. So it's just all the bowlers played in the Wayne Parnell's come back in, and he's got a wealth of experience when he left South African cricket to play around the world. So, all these things contribute to building your mentality and character in T20 cricket. So it's definitely something that I've enjoyed watching of this group of players now at the moment is just that aspect. And in terms of your strategy, in T20 cricket, strategies always emerge. You use that word, emerge, and its ability to think on your feet. And obviously at the halfway stage, they knew they had to take a risk. Maybe in the past, they never were bold enough to take that risk as a group. But they were definitely bold enough to take the risk because that was the opportunity to win the game. And I always tell players, the risk is where the opportunity lies, to win T20 games. And they took it, and you got to doff your hat to, even the management that, at the halfway stage in that strategic timeout came up and gave the players the confidence and they just rode with it and eventually dominated India. Yeah.
You mentioned two players that are really interesting to me. One was David Miller and the other is Wayne Parnell. And, there's some similarities for me between the two because they were both really highly touted in their early 20s. And yet we've seen them touch the ceiling or come close to the ceiling of their potential in their early 30s. And that's an interesting thing for me. And I'd imagine that their rise has not only been cricket related. I'd imagine that there's an emotional maturity dimension there. Maybe something's tied up around identity. When you're young, maybe your entire identity is kind of wrapped up in the fabric of what you do. And I'd imagine there'd be some progression in this area for them. And I wanted to know from you, your observations around their rise now in the early 30s. They're both 33. And I feel like Wayne Parnell in particular is playing some of the best cricket of his career, international cricket of his career. David Miller, obviously. And so I wanted to know from your perspective, what is your experience like? What it's been like? What is your observation around those two in particular?
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think when you come into international cricket quite young, you're not sure whether you're good enough, at the time. These are two players that were obviously extremely gifted and did some good things early doors in their careers. And obviously they added a little bit of pressure. I think in South Africa, we expect people to be the finished article at early 20s. I mean, everybody wants that, but realistically, as a cricketer, you need experience, and you got to be a willingness to learn and coachable. I'm not surprised by what they're doing. I think these two players have a lot of experience now, especially in the T20 format. They've experienced a lot of pain, a lot of disappointment, and I think that's part of development of a cricket player. You have to experience disappointment and experience great highs. Maybe those two players could have been managed a little bit differently. Maybe that's something our system needs to look at. Could we have managed them a bit better when they were younger? That's questions. I mean, I wasn't part of coaching structures and discussing player development. That was far from my thinking back then. But definitely now, you start thinking how quickly you can develop a player into becoming something or fulfilling his potential. So maybe that's something that maybe we can go back and track, and maybe it's something we can look and how we can maybe do it better, within our system. But definitely it's their life experience too. You talked about identity, emotional intelligence, self-awareness. You're a little bit more secure who you are as a person. And that comes out on a cricket field too. You make better decisions. you're comfortable with being accountable for them. And then people talk about maturity, and that's a big thing, in terms of becoming an all-round wonderful cricketer, which they're becoming now,
Right. I want you to speak about Temba Bavuma. There's an argument that Temba's leadership compensates for a lack of runs, lack of contribution, in which I think is the primary metric that we must measure Temba by. In your experience, has it ever been the case where somebody's leadership ability is so significant and so important to the team that it trumps what their primary role in the team is? Or has your experience been different?
I think you still got to be contributing, in terms of performances. I think that doesn't go away. I think that should always be the expectation. But I have experienced this before, actually, when I was coaching. I was assistant coach in the T10, and I had the privilege of working with Darren Sammy, of the West Indies. And although Darren did perform occasionally with a bat, his primary role was connecting the group and keeping them together, over the course of the tournament, and chatting to him. That was his primary role at the West Indies. You can see the importance of leadership in their cricket. What he actually did was to be able to sort of pull them together, and there is an element of that, I think, in tournaments. Clearly the team do support Temba. I know people can obviously say that, they have to say that in the media, but I do generally feel that they really do support him, and they want the best for him. They really want him to perform. Right. So he clearly does know how to lead. We only have to look back at last T20 World Cup, with taking the knee and Black Lives Matter, how brilliantly he led that whole situation. So he does have those credentials, and sometimes that's also what you need to win a World Cup. We're not going to exempt him from performances, but leadership is a key ingredient. And I do like Temba's captaincy on the field. I have to say, I think how he moves his pieces around, who he bowls, he's clearly very meticulous in his planning. So I do think there's a place for that, that can change the game. But until you're part of that management group, you won't see the full picture. But on watching him and how he moves his pieces around, he's definitely a good captain in T20 for me.
Sure. Just let's expand our lens a little bit now. I wanted to speak about India, who appeared to show like some significant deficiencies in the areas of the game, particularly at Perth. And so I was wondering if that is just situational. The wicket suited South Africa's bowlers, and the way that we executed on our plans was phenomenal. Or if there's something more that we should be reading into the makeup of that Indian team.
I think if you had to choose anywhere to play India in Australia, it'd probably be Perth.
Yeah.
So a little bit stars aligned a little bit for South Africa in terms of that. And sometimes you need that little bit of luck to win a World Cup. You play big opposition and the right conditions that probably suit you a little bit more than them. Yeah. India's always, they've become better at playing pace bowling, but when you're having someone bowling 150 clicks at you, it tests a different part of your mentality. And I think they got tested quite a bit. Lungi and Gidi was outstanding. Just collectively as a pace bowling unit, I think they were outstanding. Execution, top. They fielded well too, South Africa. So I think India have always, showed that trait. And sometimes when you say it in the press and you hear about Perth has got all this extra bounce, I think it definitely played on the mind of the Indian batsmen. You could see the way they were batting that, it really affected their mentality and contributed just as much to the win as South Africa's great skills.
Right. I wanted to speak about their neighbors, Pakistan now. They were my dark horses for this tournament. I just thought that they were set up in a way that could really trouble elite sides in the world. And that match against India was one of the best I've ever seen in the T20 format. And then there's such a gulf in the standard of their performance against Zim. I'd imagine that defeat had a massive psychological impact on that team. I'm speculating, but and this is why you're here, just to give me insight. I wonder if from a psychological perspective, you can recover from blows like that mid-tournament and go again, so to speak, or if the impact of that is so terminal to a campaign that you kind of just waiting for the inevitable.
Yeah, it is a big blow. I actually think that Zimbabwe loss is probably a little bit of hangover from the Indian loss. I mean, that game was literally done and dusted. Everybody thought Pakistan had it waxed, and just a little bit of brilliance and luck. You need a little bit of luck, which Virat Kohli had. Luck and skill sort of marrying. You add temperament to that. That was probably one of the best World Cup T20 innings to get his team over the line. So I think Pakistan probably struggled with that. I think in terms of their batting, they've got nice batters. They don't look as they have dynamic batsmen like maybe a South Africa or even Pakistan and India or even Australia for that matter, or England. So I think that's probably one area they top heavy a little bit. If you expose that middle order to the new ball, they can be quite vulnerable. So right. I think that's probably the area of concern. But their bowling has always been fantastic. If Pakistan put 160 on the board, they generally give themselves a massive chance of winning cricket games. And that's how they play. They know that this is our strength. We're probably the 5th best batting lineup at the World Cup. But if we can put that number down, we'll give ourselves a chance. And so they do play extremely smart cricket. Right. The bowling attack is second to none. But I do think, that they were my dark horses. They're always my dark horses going into a World Cup. They just seem to rally around each other and pull together tightly at World Cup. So, it did hit them hard. I think that Indian game really rocked them a little bit. And the Zim game Zim were probably the beneficiaries of it, taking nothing away from the way they played.
Yeah. Let's finish on the other pool. So it's super tight there. I think 3 teams on 5. And obviously England made a big stride yesterday, beating New Zealand, who's still top, but it's so close in there now. I wanted to know your views on how that group is shaping, and who you see emerging there at the end of the day.
I always, if you ask me between those 3 sides who the best teams, I'd probably say England and Australia. Yeah. But New Zealand have whacked Australia by such a margin that they've given themselves almost basically like another win. Their net run rate. So it's going to be challenging for Australia. I do think England still have a few gears in them. I don't think they're playing their best cricket. Agreed. But that win against Zealand would have definitely given them a lot of confidence, going forward. So I anticipate that the Aussies may fall. They may not make the semi-final at their home World Cup, which will be disappointing for the tournament and for their public. But you make your own luck, and New Zealand definitely did in this tournament. So I'd probably say England and New Zealand would go through, but you never write off the Aussies. Once they qualify, if they qualify Australia, I'm sure South Africa don't want to play Australia in the semi-final. So, that could be tasty and another little challenge, dynamic developing for us going forward.
Yeah. Ravi, it's always great chatting to you. Always so insightful. So many observations that challenge my thinking, and I'm sure everyone else's. So I thank you so much for your time, my brother.
No problem. Anytime. Take care, man.
Have a great day. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.